Greetings, humans of the internet. Welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you, as usual, from my undisclosed location in Midwest USA with some more historic insights. And since we've had 2 weeks of lawlessness, I thought it would be a good time to discuss law enforcement. I know we already did an episode on the history of police officers and the American police force. However, I thought it would be a good time to highlight detectives. Private eyes, private dicks, as they're known. Well, not anymore. That term may mean something different now, but whatever it is. And specifically, this week I would like to talk about the first female private investigator, and that, of course, is a lady named Kate Warne. So please buckle up and sit back as we dive into the life of this most magnificent woman. Despite her impressive track record, about which we will learn very soon, very little is known about Kate Warne's early life. No verified photos of her are known to exist, and she really left behind no comprehensive chronicle of her work. She was born in Erin, New York in 1830 or 1833. She came from a family of poor means and she only had a limited education. She was interested in becoming an actress, but her family opposed the idea and she soon abandoned that ambition. While she later described herself as a widow, there are no details about her marriage or the fate of her husband, who reportedly died in an accident. It really seems as though the life of the woman known as Kate Warne began in 1856, when the 23-year-old widow walked into the Pinkerton National Detective Agency offices in Chicago and declared that she would like to become a detective. Now, Pinkerton was named for and ran by Allan Pinkerton, a Scottish immigrant who worked as a deputy sheriff and for the Chicago Police Department. And in the 1850s, he opened a private agency that soon had offices in several major cities. And the Pinkerton name became renowned for its diligent approach to complicated matters that perplexed local law enforcement. Allan Pinkerton had high standards, but was also prey to the gender biases of that era. Female police officers or detectives were virtually unheard of at the time, and when Kate Warne answered a job ad in a local newspaper, Warne went to Pinkerton's office and asked to see Pinkerton about a job. And naturally, when Pinkerton saw her, he automatically assumed the young woman in front of him, whom he later described as slender, graceful in her movements, and perfectly self-possessed in her manner, with eyes filled with fire, was looking for a secretarial job. Nothing could have prepared Pinkerton for what happened next. She said that she was not interested in secretarial work, she wanted to be a detective, and she had pointed out that the ad he had placed was for a detective, and she had Pinkerton for the express purpose of becoming a private detective. And she explained that his force lacked a key component when it came to gathering intelligence, being able to assume the role of a woman's confidence. And by integrating herself, she said, she would be more likely to discover information about crimes plotted by husbands who tended to bring their wives into their confidence to schemes that involved enriching the family's means. And she would be able to take advantage of the fact that men tended to brag when women were around. However, Pinkerton remained unconvinced. It took several meetings with Warne before he decided to ignore convention and hire her, and later Pinkerton would describe her as one of the 5 best agents he had ever employed. And as the years went on, Kate Warne developed a very impressive track record. In 1858, she was tasked with obtaining a lead on a case involving the theft of $10,000 from the Adam Express Company Railroad. The agency suspected a man named Nathan Maroney, the manager of the company's Montgomery, Alabama offices, since he was believed to be the last employee to see the money before it disappeared. Warne was quickly dispatched to Montgomery, and when she arrived, she quickly charmed Mrs. Maroney. She soon divulged that her husband had not only taken the cash, but she also knew where to find it. Hidden in Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania. Nathan Maroney was convicted and all but a few $100s were recovered. On another occasion, Kate Warne thwarted a plot to poison a wealthy Captain Sumner by posing as a fortune teller. Pinkerton rented out a space for her to ply her trade, which she quickly learned from books on the subject, and hosted Sumner's sister, Annie Thayer. Thayer was impressed by Warne's knowledge of her life, which had been prepared by the Pinkerton agents. Trusting that Warne had a true gift, she eventually disclosed that she was under the direction of a lover named Mr. Patmore to assist in the murder of Patmore's wife and her own brother, Captain Sumner, so they could enjoy his fortune. Patmore was convicted of his wife's murder and spent 10 years in prison, and the pair were caught before they could murder Sumner. And perhaps Kate Warne's prowess was due to her personality, which Pinkerton would later describe as being warm and affable. People seemed eager to share secrets with her, even if those secrets were incriminating. but part of it was also Warren's unique pace among law enforcement officials. No one could suspect her of being a detective because it was considered impossible that a woman would be occupying such a role. However, she would not reach national acclaim until she met with President Lincoln. Warren's time in Alabama proved particularly useful when it came to keeping the president safe. Because she knew just how Southern belles talked and acted, she proved to be very, very adept in infiltrating Southern society. And so, when President-elect Abraham Lincoln visited Baltimore, Maryland on his trip to Washington, she donned the black and white cockade of ribbons worn by Southern sympathizers and posed as an Alabama society lady. Mixing with the city's elite, she helped to gain details of at least one major plot to kill the president. The conspirators planned to take advantage of the president's well-publicized schedule and the need for anyone heading to Washington to change trains in Baltimore. The would-be assassins plotted to take advantage of a staged scuffle at the crowded train station. Clearly, the Pinkertons' team would have to smuggle Lincoln through Baltimore ahead of schedule and under cover of darkness, and they'd somehow have to disguise the all-too-conspicuous president-elect. He was very tall and skinny, and of course the beard and such, and he also wore very cool hats. Seriously, the man wore great hats. Old Honest Abe. Great man. Great man indeed. How did they do it, you ask? Well, Warren disguised herself as Mrs. Barley and booked a sleeper compartment for herself in Philadelphia, telling a porter that her invalid brother would be joining her, and tipping him lavishly to keep the seats vacant and to leave the siblings alone during their long trip to the nation's capital. Pinkerton soon arrived on the station, escorting an almost unrecognizable Abraham Lincoln. The stovepipe hat was gone, and in its place was a new round beaver hat, like a bowler. Nothing could disguise President Lincoln's height, but Warren assisted her brother to his seat. The president stooped and disguised his silhouette and prominent jaw by wearing a shawl. And Lincoln, as Warren later recalled, was surprised by the identity of his guardian, but remained gallant. I believe it has not hitherto been one of the prerequisites of the presidency to acquire in full bloom so charming and accomplished a female relation, he told her. Warren, meanwhile, was very underwhelmed. She wrote, and I quote, "Mr. Lincoln is very homely." And throughout the long ride to Baltimore, Lincoln managed to sleep, but Kate sat upright, alert to any threats. And instead of crossing Baltimore in broad daylight in an open carriage, the president's railway car was pulled by a team of horses from one railway station to another and connected to the Washington-bound train in the middle of the night. And at dawn the next day, Pinkerton sent a coded message to the railroad executives who had hired him, reading, "Plums, Pinkerton, has delivered nuts," which was Lincoln's code name, safely. And over the coming weeks, Lincoln was sworn in as President of the United States. However, the states proved to not be fully united. On April the 13th, 1861, the Confederate States of America fired upon Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, and President Abraham Lincoln called Pinkerton to Washington to organize a secret service in the capital, but Lincoln's cabinet had another candidate for that position. Meanwhile, General George B. McClellan asked Pinkerton to set up a military intelligence service for his command, and that detective accepted. And by the end of July 1861, they had set up headquarters in Cincinnati, Ohio, to follow McClellan's division. Pinkerton brought Kate Ward with him and placed her in and around the South to pick up information for the Northern armies. She shared her time between Virginia and Tennessee, posing again as a Southern belle, familiarizing herself with other ladies of the South who spoke freely about their husbands' and boyfriends' regiments. And Warren found that information was not hard to come by. Loitering in camp towns and integrating themselves with local soldiery in the hotbed of the South, they were able to pick up such vital intelligence as to what Army Corps was stationed where, who their commanders were, where their fortifications existed, and what was their strength of their artillery. She could easily penetrate Southern social gatherings. Pinkerton and Ward often posed as a married couple while undercover. She had also used an assortment of names: Kay Warren, Kate Warren, Kay Warren, Kay Warren, Kitty Warren, Kitty Warren, Kitty Warren, and Kitty Warren, just to name a few. All documents from the Pinkerton archive, however, spelled her name Katewarne. It is believed that Pinkerton came up with the company logo for his agency, We Never Sleep, because Kate Warren never left Abraham Lincoln's side the night she escorted him into Washington, D.C. for his inauguration. Americans soon became familiar with the motto and the graphic of an alert eye studying them from the pages of magazines and newspapers, billboards, and wanted posters, and the trademark spawned the term private eye. spy, and General George B. McClellan was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Union Army in 1861, and he credited Pinkerton agents for supplying necessary information beforehand concerning enemy movements and their strength. In taking the military reins, he hoped that Pinkerton would continue to support him undercover, but Lincoln had other plans for Pinkerton, to root out traitors and spies from their nest in Washington, D.C. Pinkerton promised McClellan the use of operatives, but when he went to Washington, D.C. and organized the first government-approved spy ring in American history working out of an office on I Street, one agent who never failed him was Kate Warne. Gliding through capital society with ease and under the guise of a transplanted Southerner, she used her knowledge of Southern tradition and etiquette to grace the parlors of many Southern-minded families in Washington and suburban Georgetown. And before long, the lovely quote-unquote Southern belle with a whimsical giggle, flashing eyes, and a wrist fan was doted on by some of the district's most eligible gentlemen with secessionist secrets. And at balls, she sometimes spotted famous faces who were suspected members of Southern sympathy groups. One was the handsome Shakespearean play actor John Wilkes Booth. The information she required, the whispers she heard, she fed to her boss on I Street. Lafayette Baker, a Union spy and paranoid who saw Confederate spies behind every bush, won the trust of Secretary of War Edwin Stanton by convincing him that the Pinkerton methods were too vague and Pinkerton himself was too lenient. Stanton, who shared Baker's loathing of anything Southern to the point of obsession, had Baker's group of operatives appointed the official espionage unit in Washington. And at the same time, a dissatisfied President Lincoln replaced George McClellan as Commander-in-Chief of the Union Army. His potential gone and his best ally fired, Pinkerton withdrew from the capital in 1862 and spent the remaining 2.5 war years serving the government in a number of ways. Among these was tracking down crooked suppliers who were taking advantage of its clients by overcharging for equipment and deliveries. And to his death, Pinkerton regretted that he was not in charge of Washington security measures on the evening of April 14, 1865, when John Wilkes Booth fired a bullet into the back of Abraham Lincoln's head. He believed that if his detectives were in charge, Booth would have never reached the president's box. And Kate Warne worked on many tough cases after the war, but her two most important were murder cases. One was a combined bank robbery and murder in Mississippi, and since Pinkerton did not have enough evidence to put his main suspect in jail, in his memoirs, Pinkerton credits two specific agents for doing more in the early days than anyone else to establish the firm's reputation for efficiency and honor: Kate Warne and Timothy Webster, who was executed during the Civil War for espionage. Warne reported back to Pinkerton about all her work when he was away from the office, and they worked together on numerous cases. However, Kate Warne's life was unfortunately short. She died suddenly of pneumonia on January 28, 1868, with Pinkerton at her bedside. She was just 35 years old, and Pinkerton allowed her to be buried in his family's private plot in Chicago's Graceland Cemetery, and Allan Pinkerton was later buried beside her.